he's got to go. I'm just asking. I'm the middleman. Doug. I'll say it this way.
Oh, okay.
I said, I would like I would have lost forever. We'd say,
How did you get up and walk out, though?
no preseason. Now, there's some
Oh,
in
I didn't know.
between.
All right, you mind?
He's got some.
Yeah.
You'll see when I give you the narrative.
Okay, just, okay, I got to go. Peace out. Okay, got it.
I mean, you do it at
Yeah, well.
Okay.
Oh, what did you say? Okay. He's got some narratives with his trial use some other stuff. I'm sure with you.
Says block.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Nash County Board of Education Committee meetings to order. This time we'll start with Administrative Services and Operation, Mr. Jenkins.
All right, first thing is we need approval of minutes from last month.
So I make the motion that they approve.
Second.
Then approved and dragged. One other thing I forgot to do, let me see who's on this committee, since we get some mixed up. Roll call. Mr. Gray? Here. Ms. Chambers?
Here,
Mr. Lamb?
Present.
Mr. Whitfield?
Present.
All right. Got to do
that's how you
that. Next thing on the agenda is Ms. Sanders. How you doing? You gotta run down here.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I have this budget amendment that, on behalf of Dr. Ellis, I hope you guys have had the chance to look over it, that I would like to bring forth for approval.
Any questions?
Make a motion to approve the budget amendment.
Second?
Been approved in a second. Get a roll call. Mr. Gray,
Aye.
Ms. Chavis,
Aye.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield,
Aye.
and I'm a yes. Thank you. The other thing on the agenda is Mr. Lamb and the focus group. You got any information you'd like to present?
Yes, the RFQs have been sent out. It's on our website and the deadline, I think, is middle of March. That's it.
Anybody got any questions? You want to ask Mr. Lamb? All right, that's all we have on the Administrative Services and Operations Committee meeting agenda. I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Meeting adjourned.
The next committee, Policy Committee, Mr. Weeks.
Oh, we went out of order, didn't we? All right, we got, roll call. Mike Dutton,
Here.
Zach Gray,
Here.
Dr. LaShonda Washington,
Here.
Dean Edwards.
Here.
All right, I need I open this committee, I need a motion to accept the minutes from last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
All right, meetings are approved. We move on to policy 4210, release of students from school, and policy 2110, both will be for our school board attorney, Mr. Jason.
Good evening, board members and committee members. We'll start with policy 4210. We brought this to you last month for information only, and this is a proposed change to your release of students from school policy. And really what this does is it creates an additional type of excused absence for students who participate in a release time program, which is defined in here as a course in religious instruction conducted by a private entity off school system property. This language, like we showed you last month, establishes certain parameters for the absence to count as an excused absence. The keys, of course, are that the program takes place off campus, that there's no school system involvement. These programs aren't funded by the school district, they're not endorsed by the school district, they're not recommended by the school district. This is entirely something that's a parental and student choice. When we presented this last month, if we'll scroll down, we had two different options that place at least some sort of limits on this when a student is using this particular type of absence and it may be seen as having some kind of adverse academic impact. There were two different proposals before you last month, and in further discussion with Dr. Ellis and others, decided to use the language that you see in section 10 there, which really aligns to your current attendance policy and the language that's used for student absences. When a student is visiting a family member who's part of the military, who may be back on some sort of leave, what this does is it allows a principal on a case-by-case basis to restrict participation if a student is identified as at risk of academic failure. Then it ties into your policy 3405, students at risk of academic failure. The only other change from the version you saw last month, if you'll scroll down a little bit, Mr. McQueen, we also included a proposed effective date. So that language at the end says this section C is effective beginning with the 2025-2026 school year. That's an addition, and it just allows time really to establish a couple of the internal procedures that might be needed. Language requires the use of a particular form and allows your administration and your staff to bring principals up to speed on the types of absences that are excused under this language. And if there are any particular programs that would like to get up and operating next year, there's time for that too. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just want to clarify that this policy is being introduced because of a specific group.
It was raised by a particular group. Likewise, they've presented to you, they've spoken with a former board member, but the policy itself, it's not specific to any particular group. If the board adopts this policy change, it would open this up to any group of any particular religious or faith background.
So it would be, repeat that for me again. It would be open to any
Any student of any religious background.
And it would be open to any religious group.
That's correct.
Any religious group would have the right to have a program that's open to our students, that's held off campus, that does not receive any funding from the school board. And therefore, our students would have permission, if their parents give them permission, to leave school to participate in that program, no matter what religious organization it is, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But what Mr. Gray's talking about, they would have to provide transportation, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
There's no school system involvement in these programs other than, you know, it's a third period, for example, when students go down, you know, they'll call down to the office and go out to the front of the building to board a bus and then return. Other than that, there's no staff involvement. Staff aren't involved and should not be involved in the curriculum and teaching the courses. Shouldn't be staff of the particular programs. Staff should not be promoting or advertising, you know, participation or non-participation. It's an entirely voluntary thing that parents can take advantage of. The board does approve this language. And again, all it does, it does not approve any particular program. It just establishes an additional category of excuse absence. Thanks.
And it says students will be excused from no more than one class period per month. So it's just one class period a month.
It does include some parameters around the programs itself, and a lot of that flows down from under the state student attendance and accounting manual. It authorizes boards to establish different types of excused absences and in addition to those that are part of the manual, but there's a reasonableness component to it, and that's where some of those parameters come from, right? It needs to be something that's reasonable in the eyes of DPI, and so that's why we built in some of those particular requirements.
Ms. Washington?
Council, do you have any concerns regarding liability while the students are away?
I don't. You know, part of the reason to develop internal forms would be, you know, one, to make sure that there's a record of parent consent and acknowledgement that it's an entirely voluntary program that takes place off property, but also to ensure that there are appropriate waivers in place. So I would work with staff to develop that language.
Thank you.
Any more questions? And this is, just for information, just first read, correct?
This is first read, that's right. If it's approved out of committee, goes to the board, it would sit out for 30 days before coming back to the final.
All right, we'll move to policy 2110, I'm sorry.
I do
I'm
have
sorry.
one more question. From my understanding, policy first read, we do not do anything specific to make sure that the community and the parents are aware of these policies. I understand that it is posted on our website for them to review at their leisure, but we don't do anything specific to say, maybe we need to have people to look at this to get input from the community. I just want to be clear with that, because I think sometimes a lot of our parents and community members are not aware of the policies that are brought before the board requiring our approval and then are implemented for the district. Am I making myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know if that's something that we could work on in the future to make sure that we try to solicit as much participation from our parents as possible when we're making these policy decisions.
And that's right, that's the purpose of first read, second read, is to establish a 30-day period for feedback. Sometimes boards will receive that feedback, ask staff to make revisions. There are some districts that include a link to proposed revised policies on their board pages, so there's certainly different ways to solicit that input.
And I think the key issue also, this was initiated through a parent survey to start with. I mean, they have input on the initial survey.
But we can post, I think we have a sounding board. I don't know if we got back there. Our sounding board basically pushes out that information, but we could, I mean, there's ways we could put a link that says policies for 30-day read on the website, just let it push out there.
I would appreciate that, not specific to this policy,
Just
but to
all.
all policies from now moving forward. If we could do anything possible to try to encourage our parents to be more aware of what we're doing.
Okay? We can talk to Mr. Ward about that and figure out how to move forward.
Any other questions? Okay, policy 2110, second change in first read board member elections.
That's right. This is also for first read. This is your board member elections policy. We brought it last month without any proposed changes, just to raise it to the board's attention that, the board does not consist of 11 members anymore. So this was holdover language prior to the merger bill. Between then and now, staff had reached out to NCSBA to see if they would be proposing any changes as part of their spring updates, and they are not. So I worked with staff to develop this particular language. So what this does, it's not as simple as just saying the Board of Ed will consist of 10 members, because that's going to change in 2 years. And under the particular session law that's cited there, that's the one we often refer to as the merger law. Even as of now, officially, the Board of Education consists of 7 members from 7 single-member districts. And in addition to those 7 members, all members who were elected to the Nash Board of Education in 2022 are able to continue to serve on the board until the end of their elected term in 2026. So what I tried to do here, without making it too complicated, is to reference the particular session law, as well as reference the language that allows for the additional members that get us to 10. I'm happy to hear any feedback, thoughts, comments on it, and happy to take those and if any additional changes have been made.
On line 4, where it says elected in 2022 vacates office. Make a recommendation to put voluntarily vacates office.
That language comes straight from the session law. I'd be hesitant to change it just because the legislature didn't, specify the manner of vacating office. It's basically the member leaves for any reason, right? It could be voluntarily, it could be, hopefully not by death or disability, but they did leave it broad. I would recommend that we say that.
Any other questions? That is all that we have this time. I'll make a motion to adjourn this committee.
So move.
Motion, any second? Second, LaShonda? I need a second.
I
Adjourn?
thought you made the motion.
No,
I thought
I
heard-
didn't. I did, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
I
you're
did.
good.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
did. This meeting is adjourned.
Okay, now, academic services and accountability, Mr. Bizet.
Okay, call the committee to order, do a roll call. LaShonda Washington,
Here.
Franklin Lamb. Here. Lane Dutton,
Here.
Zach Gray.
Here.
All right. First item, to approval of previous session's minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. School calendar, not mud.
Yes.
Good evening, members of the committee and the board.
Good evening.
Here to discuss and present the work that the committee has done on school calendars for the next 2 years. All this information is in your simply information there, and it has some links to larger images of some of the things that you might need on your devices there, because some of them can get kind of small. So just to start with, the board policy that talks about calendars is policy 3300. It basically just says that the district and the board want to develop a calendar, a school calendar that recognizes that the school day in the year should be planned to facilitate student learning and permit an accurate assessment of student achievement in scheduled testing periods. It goes on to talk about following the general statute about school calendar legislation, and talks about a waiver for weather-related issues, and says that we will request a waiver if we're eligible. We are not eligible. We have not missed enough school days to be eligible per the law. And then it also references the option to convert to a year-round calendar. So when we met as a calendar committee, we took that into consideration as we were having our discussions and receiving our feedback. So the process we used, which wasn't necessarily defined by the policy, but this is my first year leading this endeavor in this role. And so I took what information was left for me from Ms. Griffin, who had done this previously, her PowerPoints and whatnot, and tried to mirror that as much as possible to create the committee and the process for this year. And so the way I understood the process is that a committee is developed typically every 2 years to discuss the policy and develop calendars for the next 2 years, get some feedback from various groups, share with the board for approval eventually, and ultimately, the board approves calendars for 2 years in a row with the understanding that there may need to be some adjustments to the calendar for weather-related issues and things like that that don't always come back to the board every time those changes need to be made. This year, the calendar committee worked on calendars for the 2025, 2026, and 2026, 26-7 school years. A lot of years there. So the 25, 26, which is next school year, and the 26, 27 school year, which is the following year. Members of the committee included representation of principals from each school level. So those are the principals of the year. That's how those were selected previously. And we just, again, like I said, I just kind of replaced the names with the roles based on what had done in the past. And so you have academics at central office, you have student services representation, athletics and child nutrition representation, human resources and federal programs representation, student services, and finance. Tried to have someone at the table from all the departments to troubleshoot issues as they arose. So the timeline started back in October. I met with the early college and city high school principals to kind of start their process and get their information that they wanted, because obviously they have a little bit different schedule than the traditional schedule. So we got their input. The calendar committee met for the first time on November 4th. We reviewed the feedback from the early college and city high school principals and also created draft calendars for traditional schools. We shared all of those calendars with school principals on November 15th to share with their school staffs to receive any feedback from school staff. November 21st, we met again as a calendar committee to discuss the feedback that was received and brought from the principals and the staff. We adjusted the calendars based on that feedback and kind of continued to refine based on what we were hearing. And then in December, the calendars were posted on the district website for feedback from the public and from the community, and for just visible to be able to be seen. January 30th at the January Parent Advisory Council, that was one of the topics on the council, and so feedback was received from the parents on the advisory council. I was there to discuss issues they had, questions, receive their feedback, etc. Took that information back to another calendar committee meeting on February 13th, where we reviewed and finalized all of the feedback that we had received, discussed all of that feedback, and made final changes to our draft proposed calendars. We created those final drafts, and then I'm here today to kind of share that information with you about what those drafts look like. And then at some point, we have surveys developed to send out to staff and to community members to gauge their approval or disapproval of the current draft calendars that we are talking about today. And those will go out sometime this week, I believe. So just a reminder of what the legislation was. We mentioned that it's mandated by statute that we follow certain things. And so these are the main components of that. The start date is no sooner than the Monday closest to August 26th. Then you have to be done the Friday closest to June 11th. There are some waivers available. The district has to be closed for the day for it to be counted as a day that counts towards your waiver. You have to go to school, or the calendar has to cover 9 months out of the year. You have to have at least 185 days of instruction or 1,025 hours of instruction. At least 9 teacher work days, so minimum 9 teacher work days, At least 2 of those work days have to be optional days that staff can take their accrued leave time if they so choose. You have to have a minimum of 10 vacation days. Annual leave days is what they're referred to in the calendar. The same or an equivalent number of legal holidays as the State Personnel Commission. School cannot be held on Sunday. Veterans Day has to be a holiday, and school staff are contracted for 215 days. So the staff have to work 215 days, no more, no less. So this is the 25-26 Comprehensive Innovative High School, Comprehensive Innovative High School's proposed calendar. If you click on, if you have the presentation open, you can click on the calendar and it pulls up a PDF. There's also PDF links in your documents if you want to pull it up for a larger image. And so this is the proposed calendar. So Comprehensive Innovative High Schools are early college and city high school. They're exempt from the calendar legislation. So they don't have to abide by the start and end dates that the legislation does. So that's why they start, as you can see there, on August 11th, I believe, which mirrors the the community college schedule, because those classes are on campus with the community college and take community college classes. First semester goes through and ends there in December. Those days in purple in December are testing days. That has to happen the last 5 days of the semester. And then their semester resumes in January. They're on that Monday, which I believe is the 5th. Spring break there indicated in April in the blue annual leave days. And then their semester and testing ends that second week in May, with the last day of school there on May 15th, it looks like. Down at the bottom, you can see how many work days to meet those requirements. You can see the instructional hours that are there, that they meet the minimum of the instructional hours and have some additional time that would cover inclement weather if needed, built into their calendar for 25-26. Same for 26-27. It mirrors pretty much the same thing in terms of starting at the same time, ending at the same time. We just adjusted the calendar 1 year. Spring break is always the week following Easter, with Good Friday as one of the holidays. So that just moves based on where Easter falls in the calendar. So you can see again, starting there, second week of August, I think that's the 10th for 26-27, ends there in December before the Christmas holiday, and then starts again that first Monday in January after the new year, matching the community college schedule, and again, ends there in May based on the community college schedule. And again, you can see at the bottom the specific hours that they meet the requirements, to meet the minimum number of days for holidays, minimum number of days for teacher work days, et cetera. And they do have additionally some banked time as well, in case of inclement weather. So then the 25-26 traditional calendar, so this would be for all other schools, not the early college and not city high school. So we followed the legislation in developing traditional calendar option 1. You can see there are some teacher work days there at the beginning of the year, taking into account some of the feedback, which I'll talk about in a moment. Starting school on Tuesday, August 26th, I believe is what it says. My eyes can't see that small from this far. Work days built in during the months. And then coming back in January and having 2 weeks of school in first semester and completing your first semester testing, similar to what this year's calendar was. And then again, second semester following a similar path, the last day of school there being June 3rd, I believe, which is similar to this year. Same process before I move on. There at the bottom, again, you can see the number of hours, minimum number of days, et cetera. Also with ample bank time for the traditional calendar schools in case of inclement weather if needed, over the minimum number of instructional hours. Same thing for 26-27. Again, just shifted the dates based on the holidays, but the structure of the calendar pretty much stayed the same based on what we have done this year and moving forward. So during that process, like I mentioned, we did have multiple opportunities for feedback from various stakeholders, and I've kind of summarized the main feedback that we heard from multiple people. So the first, one of the feedback items we got was that this current year's calendar, 24-25, and our original calendars that we proposed had more than 10 annual leave days, which is allowed. The law just says a minimum number of annual leave days have to be provided. I think the current calendar had 11, and the proposed calendar also had 11, and it was brought to the attention that new staff earn annual leave days at about 1 day per month. And so a new teacher only has 10 annual leave days, not 11. So there's some issues there with what does a teacher do on those days if they don't have accrued annual leave. And so we adjusted the calendar to only have 10 annual leave days to accommodate those staff members. We had initial feedback that staff wanted more than 1 week of work days at the beginning of the year. That's, I believe, all we had this year, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a quick turnaround. And they wanted more time to plan at the beginning of the year. By the time you do required meetings for new teachers and you learn the curriculum and you do your school safety trainings and your lockdown drills and your bloodborne pathogens and all of the other safety protocol trainings we have to do. And then you've got open house and you've got to get ready for that. By the time you've done that, it's already, the work days are gone in school and kids are coming and you haven't had any time to get ready for your room. So they wanted more than a week of work days. So we initially put in 2 weeks of work days at the beginning of the year. Then we received feedback that they didn't want 2 weeks of work days. They wanted more work days through the year. So we tried to cut that down a little bit. As you can see, you can't ever make everybody happy, as you learn quickly when you're trying to develop a school calendar. So we took some of those work days from the beginning and spread them out. And so now I think we have about a week and a half of work days, which we thought was a happy medium on the committee between the two sets of people wanting feedback there on the work days. We also received some feedback about ending first semester before Christmas, primarily for testing at exams. And so we discussed that in the calendar committee. And one of the guidance in the board policy is to create a calendar that permits an accurate assessment of student achievement. And when you test before Christmas, based on starting the school year in August 26th, you only have about 75 school days first semester, and second semester ends up with like 90 school days. And so the committee, when they discussed, determined that they felt it wasn't an accurate assessment for first semester students to have that few days versus second semester on testing. And so they preferred, based on that criteria, one of those criteria, to test after the break. Additionally, I shared with them the student assessment data from first semester last year, all exams taken first semester last year compared to all exams first semester this year, because 2 years ago, or last year, we tested prior to the Christmas break. And then this school year, we tested after the Christmas break. EOC results from just first semester this year, testing in the 24-25 school year, were 5.5% higher than they were when we tested prior to Christmas. So the data also indicated that those additional days seemed to benefit the students on their performance on the test. And so the committee determined that they felt best to leave the testing after Christmas based on that information. And so that's why, despite the objections of some, that's where the calendar fell in the proposed calendar. There was some, sure, yeah, go ahead. Stop me now. Yeah, no, go right ahead.
On the 5.5, is that overall? That's everybody's test?
Correct. That's for your EOC. So that was English 2, Math 1, and Math 3.
So how many grades is that?
That's high school, typically in grades 10, 11, 12. It just depends on the student, possibly in ninth grade for some students. So 9, 10, 11, 12, it just depends. I don't have a breakdown of how many students in each grade level. It did not include biology because the biology test this year is being renormed, and so we did not get those results back. So I pulled the biology results from last year out, and the biology results from this year did not get included. So that's just comparing test to test. So the biology results from 2 years ago were not included, and then this year we didn't include them. Like, it was just the same assessments that were compared.
Is there any state data showing how that compares with some school systems that did not follow the law and started earlier so they could finish before Christmas?
So I do have some information coming shortly about some of that. I don't have any information about which school systems, I did not pull out all of their test data to say these school systems tested before Christmas with this many days and this many days and compared across the state. I did not do that.
We're trying to figure out the ones that finished the first
semester
before Christmas.
Yes, what I do know is that there are a number of school districts, which we'll talk about in a minute, that test after Christmas. Where there's 71-ish school districts that start on time, August, and end their semester sometime. About 71. Over half, it's something like 38 of those districts test after Christmas break. And it is the vast majority of the higher performing school districts in the state test after Christmas break. Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Wake County, Charlotte, Meck, Orange, Asheville City, Buncombe County. So if you go look at like school performance rankings, a lot of the districts that perform very well are in that 38 that test after the break, if they end their semester after the break. But I do have some information coming shortly on ending before the break. I'll get to. Correct, yes. Okay. So there was a concern about testing after the break, which kind of mirrors the Christmas thing, but the parent was also asking about Memorial Day, which happens during the end of the year testing, right? And so I explained that based on the current legislation, testing has to take place in the last 5 days of the semester or the last 10 days if it's a year-long class. So primarily your high school students who have semester classes second semester, a lot of times those last 5 days, depending on where Memorial Day falls in the calendar that year, sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later, is going to be in the middle of that testing window for some students. I did state that our policy is to allow the schools to choose how they administer their tests during that 5-day window. So if there are 2 days after Memorial Day and 3 days before, a school could test all of their students in the 3 days before if they could work it out in their calendar. So they can choose on which of those 5 days they test. It just has to be during those 5 days. And then there were some concerns or some comments about wanting the traditional calendar to align more closely with the early college calendar. And I made the comment that if we follow the legislation, you can't do that because they're exempt and they can start early and the other one's not. So that's where that left us in terms of those calendars. So Mr. Lamb has asked, and the committee has discussed and reviewed what happens if you start before August 26th. So based on publicly available data as of 2/12/25, I've been to every district's website and tried to find their calendar. 31 districts in North Carolina, approximately 27% of the 115 districts, representing 22% of the students in the state, have an approved calendar for the 25-26 school year that starts before August 26th. 2 school districts have tried to start school before August 26th and have been sued. That was Union County in 2023 and Carteret County in 2024. The outcome, both districts lost and or didn't make it all the way through and just decided to have a calendar that follows the legislation. Based on what I could find from those cases and anything that I could find publicly available, there is no consequence for starting school early. Nothing in the legislation that says this is what happens to you, and I could find nothing in those court cases other than that they ultimately started on time and followed the legislation. There are, all right, so there are 13 districts representing approximately 11% of the districts and only 3.5% of the population that have a waiver. The majority of those districts are on the North Carolina-Tennessee border and missed because of weather. There are 2 districts that have restart status, meaning the entire district is a restart district, and they're allowed to operate outside the legislation as well if you're a restart district. And then that leaves 71 districts, approximately 62% of the districts and 74% of the students that are following the legislation. 60 of those 71 districts have already approved their calendars for next year and plan to start within the legislation. 11 of those 71 districts currently have not posted, or could I find in their board minutes, an approved calendar for the next school year. So there are still 11 districts making decisions on what they're going to do as of a couple weeks ago, including Nash. So just an overview of kind of what this has started. This started in 22-23 when 4 districts outside of Charlotte decided that they were going to violate the legislation and start early. And so you can see 4 districts started early in 22-23. In 23-24, that number went to 18 districts. This year, 24-25, the number was 28 districts. And then next year, there are 31 districts who have already approved the calendar to start outside of the legislation. So 3 districts have already added that were following the law that now say they're not going to. So you can see each year the numbers are kind of increasing of districts that are willing to operate outside of that. My clicker's done.
And Wake and Charlotte Mecklenburg are still operating within or without?
Yeah, so here's a map of the districts currently approved. So all of the red dots represent districts that have approved a calendar outside of the legislation. Your smaller dots represent city school districts located approximately where the cities are, and the larger dots represent the entire county district. You have Winston-Salem Forsyth, which is the 4th largest district in the state that started this year operating outside of the legislation. Cabarrus County is the 8th largest district in the state. Gaston County, the 10th largest district in the state. So 3 of the top 10 largest districts in the state are operating outside of the legislation currently or planning to next year. Wake and Charlotte Meck are following the law as of next year. Wake has not posted that I could see a calendar past next year, so that could be up for discussion.
But are they taking exams before or after?
Wake and Charlotte both take exams after the break. They were one of those, they are 2 of those districts that test after the break, follow the legislation, but extend first semester into January. So what the calendar committee did was develop a calendar based on some feedback from members of the board and others that you might want to see what this looks like. And so this is what it would look like. Very similar to the early college high school schedules. but not quite exactly the same because they try to mirror the community college days off and things like that. And the traditional calendar, some of the work days and things that we try to incorporate match more with their end of the grading periods and things like that, and not necessarily with the community college. But the start date there, you can see to accommodate those teachers who wanted more than a week of work days, we started on Tuesday, the 12th, to provide more work days. There are work days scattered throughout the month during the end of the grading period or the end of the progress report period or during benchmark times for them to have those work days to analyze the data, get their grades together, et cetera. So those are strategically placed and not just thrown in randomly. If you'll notice, the day before Thanksgiving, that Wednesday before Thanksgiving, was one of the days that was an annual leave day, but due to having 11, we turned it into a teacher work day. So you'll notice that some of those look a little bit different than what they have in the past. Particularly that day in November is a teacher work day versus an annual leave day. We took some time from that transition. We only have 2 work days in the transition to try to shorten that transition between semesters, and then you come back in January on that Tuesday and you begin back second semester. And you can see if you follow this schedule down at the bottom, you're able to balance out your days in the semester and have your testing completed before the winter break by still having the same number of days in each semester. And you can also see that it provides over the minimum required hours. I think this calendar even has more banked hours than the other option by 2 hours, I think. So it's just the difference of an early release date. But if you see, spring break is still there in the same spot, but then on this calendar, for traditional schools, the school year for students and testing would complete on May 18th. And then you would round out your 215 days with some work days and be done before June, be done before Memorial Day and kind of avoid that whole issue. So the same thing would be applicable for the 26, 27. Just go on to the next one. So you can see the same exact process. We just kind of shifted the calendar to match the next year. Again, starting on that Tuesday, I believe it's 86 days per semester, which is the same as we have now in the current calendar. Testing wraps up prior to the winter break, and then again, ending school on May 18th, with testing happening before. So Trish tried to present you with all the information that we had available to us as we were going through the process, what we came up with. We have sent out, again, like I said, the survey that's planning to go out that presents these calendars and asks which option members of the community and members of the staff prefer to come back and present to you, so you can get feedback from them as well. And then at that point, we'll take your guidance on where to follow from there. Are there any additional questions about anything we discussed or anything that you would like to see as you make your decisions? Yes, sir.
If these 31 districts know that they're violating the law, how come it keeps growing year to year?
How come it keeps growing? I don't know. I can't speak to their specifics. I would think that they're having similar conversations to this, that people want to end the first semester prior to winter break, but there are lots of concerns about the number of days and creating unbalanced semesters. And so once some people started to do it and there weren't consequences that followed, I think then more people felt at liberty to do it, I suppose. And that's why the list keeps growing each year. I haven't spoken to anyone specifically about why or what they've done. I just created a calendar as I was asked and presented it for feedback.
Listening to more parents and teachers.
So we have not currently received any feedback from parents or teachers on that early start calendar. That's what's going out tomorrow or tonight, whenever communication sends out the survey. And so the next time I come back, I'll be able to present, kind of what the community, parents, families, and teachers have to say about the options of the 2 calendars. But ultimately, that's what it would look like. It obviously could be adjusted based on anything that you say that you would like to see in the calendars. Go back and we could potentially make changes. But at the end of the day, you'll have to be the board that makes the decision. Dr. Ellis and nor I are able to make that decision. Just presenting the information
Dr.
to
Ellis
you.
can't advise you to break the law, because I'm sworn to uphold the law. But you all approved the calendar. But calendars are for students. They're not for teachers, not for parents. They're for students. Mr. Edwards asked why districts are doing this, because I think it is, when you have things like City High, early colleges, they're starting on a separate calendar because of community college. Well, I'm gonna take a guess, but we have over 400 or 500 kids taking CCP courses in high schools right now. So we have, in my opinion, you have now 4 more early colleges that have to wait. National Community has to wait for our kids to start, so they're already behind while the early colleges already started college schedules. It's just causing this issue. That's why districts, in my opinion, felt like it's easier just to go ahead and do this. What I would just advise you to do is look at the calendars and just kind of think about what you're, think about the kids, but I'm not gonna tell you to break the law. Ain't that right, Jason? I can't advise. I have to uphold the laws of the state.
I'm not
You all
asking
get
to
to
break
choose the calendar.
We could just say
I was
our
just-
lawyer advised us.
I was just wondering why in the world they keep growing. That's just weird.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. In all of the input, do we have, how much student input, especially for our high school students?
So we were supposed to go to the Student Advisory Council in January, but unfortunately that meeting got canceled. And so we did not present it to the Student Advisory Council. I'm sure we can include them in the survey information. It's just a touch of a button, I'm assuming, from communications to send it to the students as well when we send it out to everyone else. So
I would love to see that
we
input.
can do that and present it with the rest of the information next time we come together.
So sum it up once again. What was the data of test scores pre and post Christmas break?
Yeah, so I don't have it off the top of my head by subject, but total, the increase from last year to this year was 5.5% increase. I think it worked out to be like 3 points
For us,
So
testing
students,
after the Christmas break.
correct. When we tested after the break, our scores were higher than they were at least this year. So 1 year, obviously all of the data we have to go on, but the 1 year where we tested after the break, the test scores were higher than they were the year prior to when we tested before the break. And
Why do you think that's so?
I would suspect it would be I suspect it would be the additional days.
Exposure.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you go back and look at the calendar for 2 years ago, I think it was like 74 days first semester, and it's like 92 days second semester. So when you think, I mean, that's 18 additional days they had second semester to go over the same amount of information before they had to do the testing. And so when you think about 74 days, you also have to take 5 days out for testing. So it's really only 69 days to cover instruction. And then you talk about the first week of school, and when you really start to pare it down, like you really get to a small number of days. So I would suspect that the additional days played some benefit. It doesn't seem like a lot, but those extra 5 days, then you're able to come back from the break. And I know the argument from a lot of people is that students forget everything over those 2 weeks, which may be true to some degree. But they have those 5 days to come back and do some targeted review and remediation about what they need to know. What are the key points, key topics of my content that you really need to make sure you've learned? And we can really focus on that on those 5 days when you come back from break.
But if we move the calendar, it moves the start date.
If you started the start date earlier,
So then we're even, and you've got those 5 days of
Correct.
exposure.
correct, if you move the start date earlier, like we have an option two,
It's 11 plays.
then that takes those 10 days basically from after break and shifts them to before the break. And so you have the same 86 days prior to break as you have if you did the other calendar and did not start. So if you look at those, at the bottom, at those boxes, you can see that the days would match up.
Right. Yeah,
Yes, so that,
say that out loud. That's a huge point after your extra work day.
Plus, after, if you have exams before Christmas, you have 2 work days when you come back, you can get your second semester schedule balanced and all the mess.
correct. That's why that's why when we come back on that calendar, you'll look at, it doesn't start on Monday, it starts on Tuesday to provide that work day on like a Friday and a Monday for those schools to get their calendars, their schedules situated based on the results from the testing and take care of all that in those 2 days to start off second semester as soon as you come back in January. And again, you would have the same number of days second semester as you did first semester. There wouldn't be any issue with when a student took a course and not having enough time versus someone else who took a course, and then at the end of the year, their GPAs are a little bit different, and then it's because I took this class first semester and you got the chance to take it second semester. I mean, there are a lot of issues that I think when you really dig into it, the semesters need to be balanced to provide a fair opportunity for all students on those assessments and those courses.
And I think if you've been around education long enough, we used to have a balanced calendar. We always started kind of early or we ended later. it was never, the Christmas was never the issue. We either had it on the back end or the front end even. And when they did that August 28th start date, that kind of created all this, so.
Any more questions for Dr. Murphy on the calendar? Okay, while you're here, let's talk about research.
So there's one request for research, which is an extension of a project that's kind of already been approved in the district and been brought to your approval a couple months ago. They've trying to secure some additional funding and would like us to participate in part of that. So you can see the information in your packet there. That's presented for information.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you all.
Jeff White,
Thank you.
field trips.
Good evening.
Good
Evening.
Got 3 field trips that need board approval. They all meet the requirements as set forth by our district, and superintendent seeks your approval.
I make a motion, we approve these field trips. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lamb. All in favor, say aye.
Yes.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you, Mr. White. Carries. Thompson. Okay. MOU for nurse aid.
Good evening, board members and our committee chair. I stand before you to submit a recommendation to have our CTE nursing fundamental students work with Carrollton of Nashville. It is required that all of our students get a practicum through a certified program. I have attached the MOU, which outlines the obligations of the school board as well as the school and Carrollton. There are no fiscal implications, and the superintendent is presenting this for approval. Are there any questions?
No questions, entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gray, second by LaShonda Washington. All in favor, say aye.
Yes.
Opposed, like sign. Carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Letterhead kit refresh. Letterland, excuse me. Yeah.
Good evening, academic services, committee members, and other board members. I stand before you with the request to approve the purchase to refresh our Letterland kits in our kindergarten through 3rd grade classrooms. We've used Letterland for several years, and our kits are kind of wearing out, and there is a new addition. So I am sure our teachers and students would both appreciate the approval of refreshing those kits. So the superintendent submits this recommendation for approval.
I recommend approval of the Letterland kit refresh to the full board.
Second.
Okay, you have a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions?
Yes.
It doesn't look like Letterland is gonna be removed after we refresh all these kits, right?
No, it does not. We make that decision of what we use for phonics locally,
Cause I
so
remember
they're.
how open court by the time
That's
everybody had what they needed, it went out.
That's right. No. Letterland is really rooted in that science of reading and that basis. It really is what we use to teach phonics and students how to read in our lower grades. The students love it. I invite all of you. Next week is Read Across America Week, and we will have Letterland Day on Friday, March 7th. So please, if you're out somewhere, visit your local schools. You'll often find the children dressed up in their characters and book reading going on. So I invite you to come and join the fun. But yes, it will not go
I've heard a lot
away.
of good things about Letterland, but I went
Absolutely.
back to the day where we went from open court to whole language, which was a mistake.
It was. We are rooted in science right now, and I don't see us leaving
Whole
it.
language.
Okay.
That's March 7th.
March 7th.
All right, any further questions? Okay, we entertain a motion. I think LaShonda Washington made a motion, second. I heard it, Mr. Gray. All in favor, say aye.
Yes.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that will adjourn our committee.
Student Support Services and Operations, Dr. Tavis.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call to order our Student Support Service and Operation Committee. We have 4 items, but I will start with our roll call. Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield,
Present.
Mr. Edwards,
Here.
Dr. Washington.
Here.
All right, and our first thing we need to do is look at our minutes. May I get a motion to approve our minutes?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes have been approved. And our next item is for information transportation update.
Good evening, members of the board. I stand before you to present transportation updates for today. So currently, we have approximately 4,743 students who are confirmed as bus riders. We did our TD2 manual count back in October. So that was the information, The previous number was 6,993 students, and that was before our TD2 manual count, which took place in October, where we have 4,743 students on the bus. Since that time, we have added an additional 843 students, and that was in workflow beginning on October the 13th. So from October the 13th up until last week, we had added an additional 843 students. So that would put us around 5,600 students who are actually on the bus. 40 students are currently in workflow. Again, we're talking about last week. So it's probably either down or up, depending on the number of students who may be coming in or students who are not riding, who decide that they need to ride the bus. But as of last week, there were about 40 students in workflow. And as you can see there, that was due to McKinney-Vento situations of students who need shuttle routes and EC transportation. So as usual, transportation or request for transportation, that's an ongoing process that we are constantly working through daily. So there are students who are getting on buses and getting off of buses. And what I mean by getting on and getting off of buses, students who are requesting transportation or who are coming off of buses daily. So it's a constantly revolving door. The number of drivers that work both AM and PM, that's 96, which was at 96 for the start of the school year. Number of drivers that work either AM or PM, we're talking about 16. At the start of the school year, we had 13. We need a total of 123 drivers for AM and PM. And when we say that we need a total of 123, that means if everything was perfect, we had all of the drivers that we need, we would need 123 drivers for AM and PM to meet our transportation needs. The number of sub-drivers that we have is 15. We had 3 at the start of the school year. So as you can see, Mr. Byer and his team have done a really good job of working to get sub-drivers in. And we are currently without 11 drivers. So we still have 11 drivers that we need. And I think that's down from about 23 or 22 where we were earlier in the school year. As of December 1, 2024, all of the 15 new buses that we received are operational and on the road. We have 136 route buses, with 17 of those buses being parked, and they can be used as route buses or spare buses. And that's determined by Mr. Byer and his team based on what our needs are at the current time. The current number of TAs that we have who are registered to drive or driving, we have 101. We have 15 who resigned this year. We had 25 exempt due to medical reasons or they were working as self-contained EC class. We have 39 TAs who have their license. We have 6 TAs who have their permits and are waiting for the behind-the-wheel training. And we have an additional 16 who are waiting to take the bus license class. So once our TAs have been fully licensed, as you know, we use those to try to go into our elementary school, because as we shared with you before, ideally what we would like to have is our high schools who start first match with our middle schools who start last. And we would love to have elementary school with their own drivers. That way you have that time in between high school starting and middle school starting to have a chance of running the routes and getting kids to class on time. So when we're able to get bus drivers trained and we're able to get our TAs trained, we really work towards trying to create that solid foundation for our elementary schools to have their own drivers and try to pair high schools and middle schools. The district operating about 115 buses daily due to late arrivals. An average of 15 hours of instructional time has been lost across all schools. Now, this is an average based on the past 12 weeks. It's not for the entire school year, but just the past 12 weeks. Or is that the entire school year, Mr. Byer?
No, 12 weeks.
Thank you, sir. The breakdown of loss of time is as follows. Elementary schools, about 15%, with 2.25 hours. High schools sitting around 10% with about 1.5 hours. And as you can see, our greatest deficiency rests in our middle schools with about 75% and 11.25 hours. Yes, sir.
On that last stat, on the 15 hours, that's 15 total hours over 12 weeks? Was that 15 hours per day? Was that 15 hours per
15 over
week?
12 weeks. 15 total hours over 12 weeks.
So we've gone down from 1,000 hours to 15? Because at the beginning of the year, it was close to 1,000, was it?
I don't think so.
Can you remember what the chart said?
I cannot, but I can get that information and share it with you all as soon as this committee meeting is over. But I don't believe it was 1,000, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I can't remember either, I just.
But I will
wanted to know
definitely
what the
send it to you.
comparison is and how good we've done.
Absolutely. Are there any questions for me about transportation? Yes, sir.
Are we seeing applications come in for bus drivers, or it's kind of stagnant at this time?
Ms. Byer?
We are seeing a few applications come through. I think I have like 3 of them on my desk. We're going through the process to hire them.
Okay.
But the good thing about it is we still have to go through the testing.
Okay.
Right now we have 16, I think it was 16 TAs with their permit. So we gotta get their behind the wheel training done first. But hopefully we're gonna be at the end of March, we're gonna have another class to bring more drivers in.
How is our pay compared to our surrounding school districts?
So as you know, Ms. Wallace, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say it was the 22-23 school year when the state gave out a pay raise to bus drivers. At that time, before that happened, when we looked at Wilson County, Edgecombe, Halifax, Franklin, those counties kind of closer to us, we paid, we had a higher rate of pay than they did. So when the state came along and kind of evened things up by saying that you had, what was it, $15, $16 an hour, that you had to pay at least, I think that brought some of those districts closer in line to where we already were. Without having reached out and ran the numbers right now, I don't know where we sit, but I still would assume that we're probably a little bit better than those counties that I just named.
Are we doing any kind of recruitment efforts, or are we just waiting for things to come in, those applications, or how does that work?
We have done some recruitment efforts, and I'll let Mr. Byer speak to some of the things that we've done over the course of the year.
So I have Caroline helping me do a job posting on social media. She does it like once a month or whenever it comes through. We do have job postings at all the colleges, Nash Tech, Wilson, Edgecombe, just looking for, part-time students They wanna drive a bus, while they're going to school.
To follow up with that, does this also apply to bus monitors? How are we doing with bus monitors?
So bus monitor, and I'll let Mr. Byer jump in out there, say this, bus monitors for us, really isn't an issue in terms of being able to get bus monitors. We can get bus monitors. The issue when it comes to bus monitors is that, the state doesn't necessarily allot funding for bus monitors. Now, they do allot some funding for what they call safety assistance. Again, though, if we decided to put a safety assistant on every bus, I don't think with with our current transportation budget, we would have the money to fund them. We would be sitting way in the red at the end of the year. So when we're looking at bus monitors or safety assistance, what we're trying to focus on, first of all, with our EC population, they have to be there, and there's EC funding that kicks in to help pay for those. But there are some buses where there are some needs, some situations that may have happened where we try to make sure that monitors are on those buses. But again, the issue for us is the funding.
Okay.
It just doesn't exist.
Is it possible to try to come up with some type of grant to find funds to help get bus monitors? Is there any way we can do, is there any evidence to support the reason why we should have bus monitors on our buses? And if there is evidence to support why we should have bus monitors, is there any way we can use that evidence to try to write grants or to get with other school districts so that we can go to our state legislators and say, there is a need for this? We have our kids, we're getting them to school, and their safety to and from school is just as important as their time at school.
If I could wave a magic wand, I would insist, or I would make it happen that there was a bus monitor on every bus. I think when you start thinking about transportation and how things currently are and everything that is happening while a driver is trying to drive a bus, and if you take an elementary bus and there's 70 kids on that bus, absolutely, they need an additional set of eyes to help them. Again, the issue is there's not funding. Now, I have not heard personally of any grants. I don't know if Mr. Byer has seen anything as it relates to transportation. I'm not sure if, Shanice, if you've seen anything that's come through, but the state transportation department sends out information regularly. I have not seen anything that relates to grant funding for transportation.
The Christie grant probably pays 90% of our bus monitors now to the EC department. Because every EC bus has to have a monitor. She called me every day, hey, is this an EC monitor?
I know we would love to have them on every bus, but how are we on cameras? Can we see what's happening on most buses?
Yes, we have 7 cameras on every single bus. We pull the tape afterwards, download it, get the information.
So it looks like, back to pay, that we are operating around from $15.72 per hour up to about $20.17. So depending on the number of years experience, if you've been somewhere else and had experience in coming in, because if you've been here for a while and you haven't been anywhere else, unfortunately the state has not put forth funding to provide for a step increase. That's another thing that hurts us. So, but if you were driving a bus 15 years in another district and then you came here, you're gonna come in with those years of experience and you're gonna get a higher rate of pay versus if you've been here for 15 years. Because again, we just not provided the funding for step increases.
I pulled some numbers when I first got here, and I noticed that Edgecombe was paying a little bit more than Nash County. But you gotta understand, Edgecombe, they don't offer benefits to none of their drivers. So if they have a driver and they're working and they're getting close to 30 hours, they're pulling them off the road because they don't wanna pay them benefits.
Okay.
Benefits is a big part of my budget.
And I think we need to realize when the board voted to allow these TAs, require these TAs to get their bus license, that's the best thing you did. Because those TAs could get time and a half when they step on the bus. Because they've already done their 40 hours, so that's what, to me, being an old TA, I'd love to know how to get $20-some an hour to drive that bus. Because you're really just driving that one route, because we're trying to make sure those elementaries are just driving for their schools, which will help.
We are doing that.
Yeah. So that I think is gonna be a positive once you get those other ones trained, because I know we started with 20-some, because I always keep up with, so basically 11 more drivers, I get Dr. Farrell's check. Okay, I was just checking, that's how I check out.
Before the next
I'll make sure that I go out and
So I heard March was the next one. So
FMLA.
I put down here, I calculated, so 11 more drivers, we get his check for charity, Ms. Nancy Smith, so.
I'm charity.
I do, but on that note, I really think that when you get these TAs trained, I really think, and those elementary buses are sitting on those campuses for just those elementary schools, then you've got that hour wait time for middle and high school, which means you drive those double routes and you won't have that. You can tell at middle school, because they have the lag time because they're the last ones. But if you create that elementary route correctly and get those TAs driving those buses, those middles can do double runs, and that's gonna be your problem. I mean, that's what we've been hoping for, so.
Well, for example, we had 11 bus drivers call out this morning, 11. But did anyone feel it? No, because the TAs took up the slack. So that's what the TAs
That's what
are working.
That's great.
They're working.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
11 more drivers.
I would like to say this, Dr. Chavis, before I'm ending. Really, when it comes down to transportation of bus drivers, it is a human resource problem. And unfortunately, if you're gonna find the personnel, they're in the schools. People are just not running to be bus drivers. They're not jumping up and down to raise their hands. I want the job, just like they're not jumping up and down to raise their hands because they want to teach. Education, public education is under assault. We are losing much needed personnel throughout the various jobs that are needed within public education. But transportation is another one of the places that are suffering. And if we're going to be able to fulfill that void, to fill that need, the people are in the buildings. And that's unfortunate, but that's the truth.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent report. Our next, and this was for information only, I'd like to ask Christy Grant to come forward and talk to us about student service updates, SELs/mental health. Okay, well, they had your name, I was gonna give you the job. All right.
So good evening, committee members and board members. I'm Jeannie Kerr. I am here to talk to you about our mental health supports that we have as a part of student services. I'm going to get some arm workout here. So to begin with, I have linked a table that includes all of our mental health and social emotional resources across the district, where they're located in the schools and dates of implementation. This is just for your perusal, just so you'll have some details. But I'm going to be talking through these different resources as we go along. So I just wanted to share a timeline with you. The district has been building our social, emotional, and behavioral support since the 2000s. In North Carolina, just like across all of US, we are in a mental health adolescent crisis right now. Starting in around 2004, and you can see that trajectory when you look at the data, goes straight up. We have had an increase in anxiety, suicidality, self-harm, depression, and stress among our youth. And so fortunately, our district leadership has been paying attention to this data as well as the recommendations coming out of the state. So we really started amping up our resources, especially around 2016, 2018. So you will see that increase in services that we have been offering. So in 2021, when the legislation was passed for the school-based mental health services, we actually already had in place most of the requirements of that legislation. At that same time, in 2021, we were very fortunate to receive the Project Aware grant, which is a 5-year grant, as well as the Stronger Connections grant. So we had to have a total of $4.1 million that we have been able to use for staff resources and supports for our mental health, substance use prevention, and social emotional behavior supports. So our core supports are supports for everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those first. So our state PD, professional development, and this is part of that legislation. And this is something I think I get a lot of nasty looks from people sometimes that I oversee this part of it. But there are, since 2021, with this state mandated training, we have trained over 2,000 staff. And so just to tell you just briefly about what the legislation says, all new staff have to complete 6 hours of training in their first year. And that 6 hours has to come from every single one of these topics. Annually, all staff have to complete 2 hours of training. Biannually, those 2 hours of training have to come from child abuse and sex trafficking. So that's where we are this year. We're doing that 2 hours of child abuse and sex trafficking. So we're in that process, but it is good training. We're using, of course, everything is evidence-based, and we're following the guidelines presented by the state. So the other I wanted to share is also Panorama, which we have used for gathering data as our needs assessment. We started out in 22 surveying students, but we've also used it to survey staff. And this past winter, we just finished surveying parents as well. So when we have looked at implementation, any of our programs, we have done a needs assessment where we've pulled data from Panorama, a number of other sources, as well as triangulated our student data. And when I say triangulated, we've looked at our risk assessments, our suicide assessments, our threat assessments, our bullying assessments, our ODRs. We've pulled all that data together to see, okay, what are our needs and where do we need to place these needs, what schools? So these next 5 slides, I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I just wanted to highlight the 5 or 6 biggest programs that we have in our district. So we have resilience, restorative practices, second step, and Quaver. So all 4 of those are available in all of our schools depending on levels. And all of them are focused on building relationships, problem solving, conflict resolution, self-management. And with every single one of these, one of our big focuses is not just throwing a program out there. We're providing professional development to our staff, and then we're doing follow-up and data assessment. So we're pulling data after to make sure, is this the right program for our school district? Peer group connections is another one, and this is at the early college, and it specifically works with Avid, and they've had a lot of success with this program as a peer group provision. So I'm going to pause on this one, because one thing that we have implemented starting this year is a substance use prevention program. So just to give you some quick data, in 2018, we had 74 ODRs for vaping and tobacco use. In 2023, we had 535. That's a 622% increase. That's a 622% increase. And we felt like we have got to address this for the health of our students. And we know education works. That's why we're here. Education works. So we have put in place this Catch My Breath program. It is brand new. We are just now training our health educators and our nurses. It'll be in grades 5th through 9th. So it's an increasing information program to address this problem of substance use. So we're really excited about this. I just also wanted to highlight, one thing we have done is we have allowed our schools to choose programs that fit their specific needs, so it's not just the district choosing. So I've highlighted a number of things here, and again, when we have provided this money to the schools, we're not just throwing the money there, we're also matching it as well with some professional development. And you can see a number of very creative programs that have been put in place at our different schools. So next, I'm going to go on to supplemental and intensive supports. In addition to the professional development at a large scale, we've also looked at specific needs, and some of these are even for our parents, for specific staff, such as our nurses, or related services, such as OT, PT, trying to make sure that we're building that capacity and utilizing this money so that for that sustainability of knowledge all across our district. One of the big things that we have done is really focused on our school-based mental health services. We have MOUs where we've had with 5 different agencies. We have served a total of 2,379 students since 2018 when we implemented. Our grant has been used to pay for uninsured students at greater than 187. We also now have 4 staff employed with the district who are mental health clinicians. They have seen 322 students themselves, and they're able to serve them in an intensive way, working with the schools so that we can meet educational goals, which is our biggest focus that we do. So with that, I also didn't put on here, we also have 2 substance use prevention behavior support specialists to address our substance use needs. The other big area where we spend our time, effort, and energy in supporting our youth is with our hospitalized students, our students with suicidality, and our students who have threats against others. And as you can see, from 2020, we've had 211 different students who have been hospitalized, some of those multiple times. We have had 1,636 suicide assessments, and of those, 175 were at the high or imminent level. And with threat assessments, 1,428 since 2018, with 89 at high and imminent level. And what that means is those students at the high imminent level are going to the hospital, being referred immediately to mobile crisis or to services right away. They're at that highest level of risk. We do spend a lot of time in safety planning, referrals to community supports. When we do referrals, again, we just don't refer a student, we follow back up. We want to make sure that those services are being received. And we also work with our community and school-based providers to make sure that we have our recommendations that we can also implement in the schools so that those students can be successful in the educational environment. The next 4 slides, I'm not going to go into detail, but these are just groups that we have at the supplemental level for students who have a higher need. So I define me as a girls group. Real Talk is for our adolescent boys. Therapeutic drumming we have in 6 elementary schools, and it's a type of music therapy. And we also have, this is new, our vaping alternative to suspension. Again, you heard all those vaping ODRs that we were having. And so we wanted to make sure that students, instead of getting out of school suspension, received in-school suspension, so they were there learning, because we want to keep them in school, and also had that module training about vaping prevention as well. And so it's greater than 100, and the reason I have greater than 100 and aren't giving you a more specific is because with this change in semester, I know I've talked to a lot of schools and they're updating their data. So I know that we're going to be a good bit past 100 who've received this program this year. Do you all have any questions?
It was a lot of information. But it was very, very informative and very valuable. I noticed, I thought I saw a slide referring to a request for mindfulness.
Yes.
And I had a lot of study personally in mindfulness, and I use it on my grandchildren when they're misbehaving, and it calms everything down. And it works better than threats of spanking in the corner, so I was glad to see that there. I am really concerned because I know it's so much stress on our youth today, and suicide is something that frightens me to death as a board member. The thought of us, any of our students trying to take their own lives, it's just overwhelming for me. So I really applaud you all for all of this hard work. It's just awesome. Did anybody else have any questions?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. What avenues, or have you guys looked at, and I'm sorry for my voice, I apologize. But, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations Behavior Threat Assessment Team to come in and do training as well?
So we actually have been trained by the Beta Unit through SBI. So there's two now. We have the Task Force for Safer Schools,
Right.
and they're now located within SBI. So the BTAM, they're called, and all these acronyms, and the Beta Unit through SBI. And so we actually have a team that were trained through the Beta Unit, and Chrissy Grant and I were part of that team. And actually, we were just there this past week for some more training. So we have not had them come in and do mass training of everybody, but we have gone out in groups, and we then re-deliver that training. So all new student service staff who come in get a thorough, it's a half-day training. I actually am signed up to meet with our APs this month in both groups and do some training. So we do share that training back out again, because it is very good. And one thing I like about that SBI Beta group is they are constantly pulling in and learning from all these mass shootings that we have, and all that information is part of that training. I think that's very important. So we have got to stay up to date on it, and just, it's a continual training process.
Absolutely, thank you.
How well does your group work with our Nash County Social Services? I know we're providing all this and all, but as we know, students' parents need continued help too.
Yes. So we, there's a lot of new staff over at DSS. And so I personally have not gotten to know, like I did a lot of the older staff, but I know we work very closely. We have, as part of our team too, are the social workers, and the lead social work sits on our group, helping to make decisions. I've been in meetings twice last week with the various social workers, so whenever we're meeting as multidisciplinary teams about these students who are high risk or high needs, we pull in, whether it's DSS, if they have a court counselor, outside agency, we definitely pull them in. So yes, it's an important group to work with.
Any more questions? If not, thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Very, very valuable, and this was for information only.
Thank you for your time.
All right, I have a very short slide presentation, if you bring that up. Recently, Mr. Gray and I were invited to a meeting. I wasn't quite sure all the details before I got there, but we have some bus drivers that are members of NCAE, and they called this meeting the same day as the spelling bee, so we were able to make both. But if you flip the slide for me, you have to do it for me since I'm over here. Can you click it? Oh, he did. I'm looking at this one. Okay, good. Yeah, information about this. They wanted to share. It was not so much a vetting session. It was an information kind of situation, and they wanted us aware of some of their history. We had one bus driver, Richardson, who's been driving for 8 years, Battle for 40 years, Jones 6 years, Mercer 5 years, and Arrington for 16. So they wanted us aware of the expertise that they're bringing, and it wasn't to bash anybody or to downplay what other people are doing in their jobs. That wasn't the purpose of the meeting at all. It was just more or less to make us aware. And not so much a griping or complaining, but some ideas that they thought might help. And we were picked by luck of the draw, because their plan was to, I guess, contact every board member and have us come meet. And I said, that's a lot of time. I said, since we're here, let me and Mr. Gray get some information and try to take it back to the other board members, and then you still may hear from them. But we thought, for the sake of time, we'd share what they shared with us. And they weren't playing favorites. I think it was just a straw, and I think Mr. Whitfield was invited but wasn't able to attend that night. Get the next one. So, and I'm gonna try to stay with you. So their concerns were, of course, compensation, and we shared graciously that, of course, the school system is not a taxing body, and we appreciate their concerns and empathize with everybody needing more funding, but they would probably do better speaking with our local government and possibly make some presentations to state. So they were surprised to hear that information. And one of the concerns that was brought to our attention, some bus drivers feel they have 3 per seat versus 2, so there's some overcrowding. And I'm thinking in my mind as they're sharing this is probably because of our shortage of drivers, but this is information that they were giving to us. And it was a concern about safety assistance, and just like we were just shared a few moments ago, we definitely want them on the EC buses, but it's again an issue of funding or the lack of funding. So we listened to share that information, but these are things that they were concerned about. And they were concerned about the training piece. And they feel that, yes, there's some training in place, which is good, but they feel like it should be more because the safety of the students and the drivers is so crucial that more would definitely be needed. If I leave anything out, Mr. Gray, you chime right on in. One was a monitor on the bus, and they wanted to make sure that the board was aware they do a little bit more than just sit there. They're the second set of eyes for the driver. They're the listening ear for the students who, whatever problems they may have, they serve as counselors and nurses on the spot. So they're actually an active part of what happens on the bus. And some of the ideas that they thought might help, first centered around communications. One was central office when it's a crisis situation, and one example given, and we know that there are people at central office who are also involved with the transportation piece, so they're not always sitting right there. But a parent approached a driver or came on a bus to threaten a driver, so the driver was at odds as trying to reach someone as quickly as possible. They called, I think, the main transportation office and couldn't get through, so they called the switchboard, who also tried to get through. But that person they needed may have been actually on a route themselves, so they eventually called 911, but they felt the communication piece, if there was some solutions or avenues that could be researched, that would be helpful, and especially when there are parents that are not showing up where they're supposed to be. They're at odds to come back to a campus, and if no one's there on campus, they're kind of left in limbo there. Because I'm sure principals and teachers have other things to do as well near the end of the day. They felt training specifically for bus evacuation should be practiced monthly, especially when wheelchairs are involved. Again, the awareness of drivers and monitors of students, especially safety and health issues. If a child is prone to seizures or is a bleeder, they feel kind of caught off guard if there's a problem on the bus. Let's say a child has a seizure and they had no idea this child was prone to that. They kind of need some instructions on how to handle that, as well as handling disciplinary issues on the bus. And this is drivers and monitors. And the focused items were EC buses. A lot of the drivers were saying they just physically don't want to move that bus. If that monitor is called out sick or no one's there, they don't feel comfortable moving that bus at all. And safety concerns should be taken seriously. And there are some lag times that they discussed, and I just wrote this down. I don't know how that impairs what they're doing, but they were concerned about lag time between school dismissal and the time the buses leave the campus. And they want us to know that they're involved. The bus drivers felt that the advertising for the position is good, but their recommendation was so many people perceive it as part-time work. And some of them are actually full-time workers almost here. And they wanted to say some people might not be interested in part-time. It was also shared in that this could grow to possibly full-time. And they felt it's great that they seemingly feel retirees are being targeted, but thank you for letting us know that they're also advertising to students who might want some part-time. But they felt a lot of times it's perceived as a job for somebody who's retired. Personally, people who are retired may not have the patience for kids on a bus. So that's something that they were recommending that could be considered with the advertisement of the positions. And they wanted us to know that since August of 2024, that there have been 112 members, bus drivers members that have signed up for NCAE. And this is not just us, but this, I guess, is statewide. And they are planning to complete a survey of bus drivers that are members of NCAE just to get a better understanding statewide of some of the issues and possible solutions that could help not just our system, but systems across the state. And in a nutshell, that was the meeting, and so we agreed to help them out by bringing this and sharing this information with the rest of you all tonight. Mr. Gray, did I leave anything out?
No, ma'am, I think you did a good job.
And we promised them that we would share it, so we have done that. And they welcome any of our board members or anybody at central office to reach out and help them get a better understanding or help with some of these ideas. And so that's that.
How many, how long has NCAE been recruiting bus drivers?
That part I could not tell you. And that was
Because
not.
last time I looked, only 18% of the teachers in North Carolina are members of the NCAE. So I just wonder if they
Right, if there's an.
short of members and they trying to go another avenue now.
I do not know, and I think this group was interested in joining so that they could feel a sense of support.
You don't know how much they had to pay for dues.
I don't, it's not what I think teachers is. I think it's like $25 or $30 or something.
I knew something new, but.
And I thought it was much more than that, but I think that was.
Teachers are about 100, I think. Teachers are about
So,
100 and something. I
Where,
don't know.
where was this information collected at? Was it a meeting?
Yeah, they invited us to a meeting and they are planning, and I said it's luck of the draw, cause you probably got a call or we'll get a call. But when they were saying they were planning to reach out to every board member, they're careful not to create a quorum. So I think they were reaching us 3x3 or 4x4. So I had no idea it was bus drivers until I got there, cause my invitation, it just said NCAE, and I said, well, let me go in here before the spelling bee. And so I gathered and listened to this and said I would help them bring it back to you, because I know everybody here can't always break to do these meetings. So this is the information shared. It was, for information only. It was not a bashing session. They had nothing complainant to say about supervisors or our system. It was like, these are the things we find concerning, and we just want to share.
So, Mr. Bauer, have you been invited to one of these meetings?
Yes, sir.
Have you been, any of this information been brought to your attention first?
No, sir.
Now, they are aware, I believe, that they make reports, there are trained, they weren't saying there is none, or there is absolute no communication. This was their ideas that they thought they could share that might
We
help.
have a meeting tomorrow, with one of the leads, tomorrow around lunchtime, Dr. Ellis and Dr. Farrell.
Maybe NCAE do better for bus drivers than they've done for teachers.
So what, I couldn't.
Maybe NCAE will do better for bus drivers than they've done for teachers.
All right. Well, if there are no more comments, this was for information only, and I would move to adjourn this meeting if I can get a motion.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? The meeting is adjourned.
Anybody else have anything to add to the meeting at this time? Speaking of bus drivers, I did say something to Dr. Ellis, and I think the other board members need to know, because of the circumstances of inclement weather now, we've got, what, 16 full-time bus drivers? And I was thinking, nobody would want to have 4 days of pay yanked from your paycheck. And I've been told if they don't work, they don't get paid, which by law, we can't, pay somebody who don't work. But that's something that I think we need to look into, because like I said, I don't think nobody would want 4 to 5 days of pay pulled out of your check with no way to make it up. It's not your decision. So I've asked Dr. Ellis and Mr. Byer to work on something. If it means if the buses didn't drive 4 days, how much do we save by not putting the buses on the road? And it's already been budgeted. We just need to treat people fairly. And teachers can make up the days, TAs can make up the days. Child nutrition, a good principal, good child nutritionist can find a way to make up the days. We just need to treat them fairly.
So we can, have that conversation. I think me and Dr. Farrell talked about today in cabinet, so we can come up with some solutions or some options that you might want to consider.
I just wanted to make the rest of the board members know that
we did a few things during COVID.
This is all new.
Same way.
We haven't had 3 or 4 snow days in a long time.
Yeah.
Especially since Zoom came in.
speaking of that, I got one question. Mr. Dr. Mudd, how many we got in the hours we got banked?
Early college doesn't have anything.
No, nothing at all.
And the early college is also out of remote days. And then for the traditional schools, the one remote day is still available to use and 21 hours, I think, after
22
Friday,
hours.
being a day.
I meant to ask you when you were up there, I apologize.
Oh, that's fine.
Any more comments? I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Bizzard, second by Mr. Jenkins. All in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.